We are live.
Good afternoon. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the July 30th, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce all committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Hello.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Hello.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good afternoon.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good afternoon.
Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Vertinsky.
Good afternoon.
Community Development Division Manager James Shelton.
Hey, y'all.
And additionally, I would like to welcome staff from Self-Help Credit Union. John Freilich, the Affordable Housing Sector Leader.
Good afternoon.
John Ruggiero, Director, Capital Development.
Hey, everyone.
And Tracy Thompson, Housing Program Associate.
Hello.
Welcome. Council, at this point, we'll move to the first item on our agenda today, which is the approval of the minutes from the June 17th, 2025 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is the 2024 Affordable Housing Bond Plan. And here to present to us is Sasha Vertinsky. Sasha.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, Sasha Vertinsky here, and I'm here to talk a bit about our bond funding plan. Go ahead next, Katie. As we all know, in November of 2024, the community strongly approved a $20 million affordable housing bond. So these are just a few key takeaways. We have also been invited to join the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund, which could help leverage city funds to enable much larger sources of gap funding for affordable multifamily projects within the city. Recently, we held several listening sessions with affordable housing developers and stakeholders to receive feedback on this initial plan. And today, we're really just here to hear your feedback. We have not changed anything in this presentation since we've talked to folks in the community. We did get some feedback from them that we can talk through, but we just kept it the same to hear from you all first. And we will be coming back in August to HCD. Next. So just really quickly, some context for affordable housing financing. Our 2016 bond funds have all been allocated, and Housing Trust Fund funds as well. The Housing Trust Fund has had like a mix of bond and non-bond dollars, but so we've allocated all of those funds right now. And as you know, the city was awarded $225 million of CDBG DR funds, and 28 million of those funds were designated for multifamily construction. a program manual for those funds is in development right now, and that will have policies and procedures and kind of tell us staff how we're going to implement that program. The state of North Carolina will also have CDBG-DR funds available for both home ownership and multifamily construction. We've all probably heard by now about the Renew NC program, which is really for currently owned homes where people need help with either repair or reconstruction of their homes from storm damage. So I have not put that in this line, these little boxes down here, but they will have additional program for, it's called workforce home ownership and also the multifamily construction. The programs, manuals, policies, and those programs, have not been rolled out yet. We expect those to be rolled out probably in August, September this year. So I've talked through all of that. And then lastly, there are some home ARP funds, $3 million. That is for multifamily construction that is really targeted towards preventing homelessness and alleviating homelessness. And James Shelton is here, just as a resource for us and for you for questions, if questions come up about any of those programs. Next. Really quickly, background on our housing bonds. In 2016 was a $25 million affordable housing bond, and we have $20 million this time. Bonds in general are limited to capital expenditures that serve low and moderate income people, and they can include construction, pre-development expenses, land or housing acquisition, down payment assistance, home repair, and infrastructure improvements. So it can't go to things like rental assistance, things we really need in our community, but those funds can't be spent that way. Next. This is a pie chart of how we spent our last bond. So about almost 54% of our past spending went to housing units themselves. That list is primarily rental units, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Home repair, you all allocated remaining bond funds, some returned bond funds in October, right after the storm, to home repair, and so that contract is happening and that work is happening. We spent about a third of the bond on land, and we purchased or put money towards the purchase of 5 pieces of property. So 3 of those are city-owned properties. We worked, Haywood Street apartments, those are getting close to being finished right now, and then Star Point, which is under construction. So we helped with the land for those projects. Pre-development and due diligence for city-owned properties and with Haywood Street, and then infrastructure. The one thing that's not represented here is how does this break out by tenure, as they say in the statistical world. So the majority of this funding went to rental. So approximately 1.5 million of these funds went to home ownership. Either, and really those are represented by the Habitat's projects, the DPA project that you all approved last April, in 24 of April, and Habitat loan approved maybe in 2021 or so for 8 scattered site home projects. So those were, they built or rehabbed homes, and then we have money in those homes as DPA after it's sold. Next. I went down a little bit into the rabbit hole there. I didn't mean to do that, sorry. So considerations for the future bond. We know of, I have 6 or more multifamily developments in the planning stages. It's really closer to 8 or 9 projects that we're aware of that are going to need gap financing from a range of sources. City does not have all the money to fill all those gaps. Those gaps range from, I'd say, $80 to $100 million in terms of gap financing needed. There's a remaining $715,000 for disaster home repair from last fall that you allocated, and we could repurpose that to be pre-disaster home repair if needed. We'll be meeting with our contractors and see if that's an appropriate step to take. And if so, we would come back to you for that. State CDBG-DR program funds are available, and I talked about this just a few minutes ago, so I don't need to say all that. But there is $191 million for multifamily construction from the state. That is a region-wide, so that's not just our area. But as we're the population center, we would expect to see funds spent in Asheville. But they may expect, we don't know, they may expect to see us spend all our money first before they start investing in the city. We don't know yet. Next. So these are, this is just very draft. This is kind of what we think could be a workable plan, and it's similar to the DR plan that you have looked at. It doesn't mean it can't be changed as we go, but giving all the considerations, and we've reviewed the brand new housing needs assessment. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And we know it's in the pipeline. We've actually talked to some other nonprofits about what's in their pipeline. This looks to us right now as a good kind of distribution of those funds. So we are considering $10 million for the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund. But we're bringing that proposal to you to consider, really, and we'll hear about that in just a minute. We do have current affordable housing projects 319 Biltmore and Oak Hill underway. We are reviewing responses to an RFP for Oak Hill, and we expect to be bringing a proposal to you probably this winter for that. It will likely be a homeownership project. And Oak Hill, if you don't remember, is off of New Leicester Highway. So in West Asheville, not too far from Patton Avenue. We are also proposing that $6 million of the $20 million be put to the Housing Trust Fund, and then those funds would be eligible for all the other uses besides multifamily construction in the Housing Trust Fund. So it could be used for down payment assistance, home ownership in general, land acquisition, those types of things. And then we are proposing $1 million be set aside for pre-disaster home repair. So people before the storm who needed repair to their homes. CDBG-DR won't get to those folks. Regular CDBG allocation can be used for home repair. And James can talk about that if needed. So next. So yeah, I will. Can you back up, Katie? I'm sorry. So I will say, because we did not change this presentation, I was out of town for a couple weeks and things were moving very fast. We are currently working with Patrick Bowen, who does the housing needs assessment, to bring back some more data to you all about how can that housing needs assessment inform these distributions and what's our strategy in terms of how we spend our bond funds. I would say both the affordable housing plan and the housing needs assessment talk about both rental and home ownership as very important. But neither of those documents prioritizes one over the other or necessarily says this is the distribution. I will say that after the storm, given our current context, there are a lot of vulnerable folks who rent, and we're very concerned about stabilizing those folks and making sure that they can stay in the community and that we make sure that folks don't fall into homelessness unnecessarily. So I think that is part of our reasoning for suggesting this distribution as it is. All right.
Sorry, Sasha. How do we land on the amount for the pre-disaster home repair?
It's a good question. I think, council in that allocation last fall, it was close to 1.5 million for home repair. We contracted with Archer, which is it's Habitat, Mountain Housing, Poder-Emma, Community Action Opportunities, and ABCLT. They're a coalition. We contracted with them for $750,000. And it is storm repair, and there's a capacity, folks can only do so much. So there is still another half of that contract there. I feel like between that contract and this 1 million, we think we can meet most of the need. But again, we can look deeper at the data and make sure that's true. And we're meeting with Habitat staff soon as well to discuss some of those issues. Next, Katie. So here's, we want to focus just on that 10 million a little bit for the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund and explain what that is. So this past February, this new Affordable Housing Loan Fund was announced by Self-Help Credit Union, and Dogwood Health Trust really got this fund kick-started with 40 million to start the fund. It is currently for the creation and preservation of affordable rental housing. And to date, this is a couple weeks old, and so I don't know if anything's changed, but they've closed a loan already. So we're less than 6 months into this loan's existence. They have $19 million in origination, meaning folks have applied and they are doing their due diligence and underwriting, and then another 18 million in leads. We've been invited to participate in the fund. We had been, previous to this fund being created, we have been talking about trying to create a funding collaborative where it could be city, maybe the county if they had funding, and Dogwood Health Trust coming together to work together on these loans. So this, in a way, meets that need. And so at this point, I want to turn it over to James Ruggiero to talk through the self-help slides, and so for me to not butcher anything. But so Katie, you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, first off, thanks to the committee for inviting Self-Help Credit Union to participate today. We thought I could just share a quick background as context on who Self-Help is, and then dive into how we design the funds. And so Self-Help is a family of nonprofits rooted in North Carolina, founded in Durham in 1980, with the common goal to create and protect economic opportunity for all. And so to fulfill that mission, we provide responsible banking services and lending to our members and communities throughout our branch footprint, including 2 branches in Asheville, total of 7 branches across Western North Carolina, serving 21,000 of our credit union members. And so in 2019, in response to the worsening affordable housing crisis we were seeing in communities we served, we started launching these public-private partnership fund models and designed them to leverage and extend scarce local housing-focused capital in order to get flexible financing to partners who are creating and preserving affordable housing units. And so the first fund we launched was in Durham, and that was a collaboration with City of Durham, Duke University, Truist, and the North Carolina Community Development Initiative. And the goal of that fund was to provide acquisition bridge loans, since at the time, affordable housing developers needed flexible financing to compete with market rate developers who were snatching up available properties with all cash offers. So that was the original model. And now since then, we've launched 4 other funds and now manage 5 total, representing 140 million of assets under management between those 5 funds. And so the largest fund is in Wake County, and that's $62 million. That one was a partnership with City of Raleigh, Wake County, First Horizon Bank, and Truist Bank. And each of the 5 funds have different flavors depending on the needs of each of those specific communities. But the common goal is increasing affordable rental housing. And all these funds, except in Western North Carolina, is a mix of public and private dollars. And Dogwood wanted to get the model out as fast as possible with the 40 million, but that's that only scratches the surface, I think, of affordable housing need, which has only been exacerbated by Hurricane Helene. So Dogwood Self-Help is very interested in growing that fund and adding public dollars to unlock additional private capital, which would all be earmarked for Asheville affordable housing projects. You can jump.
Next. Just say next when you're ready to move on.
Yeah, and then the next slide. This is just a quick representation of how each of our funds is a collaborative effort. And so the purpose here is to highlight the broad range of types of partners, borrowers, investors, community stakeholders that work with Self-Help And Self-Help Ventures Fund is really that like hub and spoke as the fund administrator, working together to connect all these different stakeholders and identify needs and manage the overall fund and lending. And I'd highlight two key benefits of self-help as the administrator is one, on the fundraising side. And so during 4 decades of operations, self-help has raised and managed hundreds of millions of dollars from public, private institutions. We have a very large balance sheet to provide that protection for fundraising leverage and capital from banks, from foundations, from corporations to support affordable housing in these funds. And then the other benefit I'd highlight, which is the team JJ, who's on the call, and Tracy work on, is on our commercial lending team that has a track record of lending to affordable housing projects. We have a lending team of over 35 full-time employees, from loan officers to business development officers to underwriters, folks. We have a loan servicing team. So self-help serves as that administrator to both fundraise capital from these mix of parties, and then also to lend the capital into communities and grow affordable housing. Next slide. And so here, try not to get distracted by the different colors in this chart, but it's essentially the flow chart is designed to represent how dollars flow through the fund. And so the actual fund here is represented by that purple and green box. And so from left to right, investors, public and private dollars are blended together into the fund that self-help manages. And then from the fund, we originate both gap loans and bridge loans to affordable housing partners. And then that right side, those two rectangles are designed to demonstrate how this financing fills capital gaps in capital stacks, particularly for LIHTC projects, and also compare it to conventional projects. And then the goal here is really the loans that the fund is originating is designed to fill those gaps, replace expensive project equity, bring down the overall cost of projects to make them viable, and also to increase affordability to the end renters of the projects. Next slide. And here we get into a little more like the terms of the two products, the loan products that we offer. JJ, Tracy, you want to share a little color on the two products we offer?
Yeah, I'll hop in for this one. So the two products that exist under the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund, the first one is bridge financing, and this one exists to one of the points James was touching on earlier, kind of scoop up those pieces of either parcels or houses that could be used for later affordable housing projects. And then the other one on the right is mezzanine, and this is our permanent financing. So this one is longer term as well. It's 15 years, and it's meant to be that gap filler that, you know, we keep talking about. This is the one you'll be using, the developers would be using in that, those LIHTC projects. So the bridge, so the one to scoop up properties for future use of affordable housing, loan size is $500,000 up to $7 million. Shorter term here, so 5 years. Interest rate on that one is 2.95. And then interest only payments, and there's no prepayment penalty if the developer wants to pay off early. And for that one, we can go up to 110, loan to value. And for the mezzanine, the permanent gap financing on the right, the same loan size, so 500 to 7 million, longer term, 15 years. The interest rate's a little bit lower for this one, 2.45. Same as bridge, interest only payments, no payment penalty. And for this one, because it's meant to be that subordinate debt, the gap filler, we can go up to 30% loan to value for this one, with a combined loan to value of 95%. And for both products, The units must serve households at or below 80% area median income. So our minimum requirement for both of these products is that half of the units serve 80% or below. And then at the bottom of the slide, you can see it's just the 18 counties that this fund covers. And we can move, unless there's questions, Sasha.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I have the next slide, but if you all have any questions for self-help staff, and we could do it at the end too, but.
Yeah, whichever way y'all like to handle it.
Well, let's keep going, Katie. And then, so I think this is where I take over. I think, as city staff sees it, there's, low interest gap financing is really challenging for projects. By joining the loan fund, we can strategically partnership with Dogwood to leverage our, zero interest capital. So we would be loaning $10 million to self-help at 0% interest capital. And that enables them to go out to the private market and get additional capital from banks, which they won't loan to self-help at 0%. They'll loan at a higher interest rate, and it kind of can mix those interest rates to get to a lower interest rate for affordable housing developers. It will, so because it's leveraging those other private dollars, it will expand the number of projects the fund can support. It ensures our dollars go further for critical community needs. It streamlines the application process for developers. They don't, they're not going to as many financiers. And they, self-help has this long history of commercial lending, and they've got the staff and the depth of experience. They're able to turn these around a little bit faster than we can. And really, I feel like we have a strong confidence in their skill level. We don't have any commercial lenders on our staff, if that makes sense. So they would take over the underwriting and loan administration duties from us, and it would free up, some of our time to carry out other council priorities around housing and the affordable housing plan.
And Sasha, if I can just interrupt, I do want to just emphasize our why on a staff perspective, why we are proposing this partnership with self-help. And it really has to do with those first two bullets. On our own, we are not equipped to seek out private bank partners like a Truist, a Bank of America, First Citizens Bank. I've met some of those staff members from those banks in the past who manage their CRA funding, and we are just not equipped. But through this vehicle, it really can expand our reach. And so I think as our housing trust fund over the year has evolved, this is really that next step in the evolution of not only just the city being in the position of gap financing, or the city with the county, as it often has been in the past, or the city and Dogwood. This actually grows that opportunity even more and really allows us to start having a vehicle by which to attract private sector dollars to help us in this charge. And so again, for me, that is what I wanted to emphasize, because truly that is a value proposition for the city of Asheville. And so with that, I'll just go ahead, Madam Chair.
So then is the hope for the assumption that a developer will go to this fund first prior to coming to us? And do you envision them and us, a developer, coming to?
Sorry, so yeah, I didn't go through the steps. So we would loan our funds to self-help.
Yes.
And then they go to self-help and they don't come to us for the funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also, sometimes for some of ours, we go, there is a request that source of income is, if we make this loan, can we require any source of income?
In our meeting, we met with self-help staff a few weeks ago and discussed this because it was raised by the community as a concern. And I think we discussed putting that language, the same language we put into our housing trust agreements, into their loan agreements for projects in the city of Asheville, that there won't be any source of income discrimination in those projects.
Stay.
A couple things really. First off, just some general excitement. I feel like our toolbox is just getting sharp. You know, we've come a long way. So great work to staff. I mean, this is a big thing. Self-help folks, I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about how this plays out in other cities that are doing it well, where you have more than one loan. Because what I'm seeing that may be a new tool here that we haven't really been able to address with our pot of funds and processes thus far is maybe some missing middle financing tools, quadplexes, eightplexes, and so on. Do you see that in your other cities?
James, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. So this is JJ Freilich. I've kind of been in the sector since our fund launched in Durham in 2019. So some anecdotal information I think will help answer the question there, Councilwoman Turner. So in Durham, our $10 million fund is fully deployed, and we're looking to grow it to $30 million this year. And in that deployment, that was all bridge lending. But what I found interesting was the scope of the really broad scope of projects that it financed. So everything from acquisition of vacant land for future development, acquisition of operating large multifamily property that was operating but needed a lot of renovation, acquisition of an extended stay hotel that was turned into much needed transitional housing for homeless. And a kind of brownfield historic development acquisition. So
Bigger.
So really quite a range here. I didn't even mention all of them. So that fund, I think a lesson learned from that fund, of course, is you want to have a big fund before you need it. Because we fully deployed the 10 million. And now we're working to further grow the fund with additional community partnership. In Wake County's fund is quite different in that Wake County's fund did introduce the gap financing in addition to bridge. So that was a great kind of leap forward. That fund primarily has been bridge to date, but now some of those bridge loans are graduating to permanent financing, where the bridge loan was designed in Wake County for preservation only. So we're preserving properties, and then from there, they then can come back to the fund for the final capital when they've done that. So a good example is we have a large naturally occurring affordable housing property that a nonprofit was able to acquire, and they needed the time to assemble the full capital for permanent financing. And so they're able to acquire it with a loan fund, and now they're coming back to us with additional financing and needing the gap financing from the fund as well. So we're using both fund products with that. So real advantage to having both products in the fund. Also had for-profit developers take use of the fund for both fairly large projects and relatively small ones. I think specifically to your question for missing middle housing, our MIN fund's deployment number is 500,000, and that's really to serve multifamily. We look at as 5+ units, and so that's what we'll be looking at is 5+ units for rental housing. It could be a variety. One of the opportunities I didn't mention in the Durham fund was we can take a look at scattered site portfolios where you may have a variety of multiple duplexes or triplexes that are all in one portfolio, but it has the scale that the fund can really help support. I always tell folks what the fund is not for. So the fund is not for, this is not the single family housing answer here. So I know the city has other opportunities to support single family housing. That's not what we're best equipped for. So we're really focused on the multifamily housing side. Was that helpful?
It is really helpful, because I think one of the things that we've experienced here is we have single family housing, and we have some small complexes, but then we have these large ones, hundreds of plus. So it sounds like there's opportunity there. It may not be, executing that way, but there's nothing stopping it from being a potential loan fund for something like that. So that's really helpful. I feel like it's a gap in itself. But I want to also echo what I heard some staff say about the confidence in self-help. I've known of self-help and worked with self-help in decades past. And I want to echo my appreciation for the entire organization and what y'all have done in Durham. I'm mostly familiar with, and it's just great to be in the partnership level with y'all. I have great respect for the organization. So I'm excited in general. And I don't really have any other questions right now. I was just kind of taking all this in and I may have more questions later, but it's wonderful. Wonderful opportunity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there
Oh,
a slide?
one more, I'm sorry.
Go
In
ahead.
relation to what we heard from the community, in particular, the Buncombe County Affordable Housing Group, they were asking, and I just kind of want to make sure I cover this. Are there any policies or any kind of criteria within our existing WEAG or HTF that don't necessarily carry over to this loan fund? Any, things that we've built into our policies that may get lost in this transition? Someone mentioned the source of income. Any other things?
Great question.
And we can certainly take that back too. I definitely want this to be an opportunity to give us all your questions so that we
Okay.
can use our next opportunity at the August HCD when we actually propose this for a formal vote, that we're able to address those. So let's write that down, Sasha, and make sure that
Yeah.
we follow up and have a solid answer in August.
Yeah, they basically had a couple points just asking us generally to slow down on some of this, 20 million in particular. And then there was a kind of a request from this group of, are we doing enough for the home ownership portion? And I think we also heard from the ABCLT on a similar on that. Are you all getting these emails and that you might be able to respond to those? Okay, great. As long as you've got those questions in your queue as well, that will help.
And I think, and Sasha touched on this earlier, but one of the things that we wanted to do, because we certainly did want to address that dynamic of the rental homeownership and do we have the allocation right? And so we have asked Patrick Bowen to really help us with that too, to allow that to be data informed. I appreciate even that question around the home repair piece too. So we're going to be working with Patrick. He and I spoke just the other day to again bring some of that data back to this committee in August to allow that to also help understand how that distribution of funds could play out versus the need and the data that we see for rental versus homeownership. So that's going to play a big part in our August presentation as well.
Great. Well, lots of big numbers in this presentation. Great work, staff. Thank you. And thanks, Self-Help folks, for being here.
Okay, I can keep going if y'all are, okay. Yep, keep going. And I will go really quickly. This feels a little bit disjointed now to me, but we just want to make sure you're aware. So we have $28 million set aside for multifamily housing construction. Similar to self-help, minimum project award around 500,000. These are gap filling funds, similar also to self-help. 10 to 20% of total development costs. The city, like I said before, is working on a program manual with Haggerty. We're working on that, and there would be a notice, a NOFO, and notice of funding opportunity, and folks will be able to respond. It's got a wide range of eligible activities. Next, Katie, before I say anything more, I want to see if it's maybe on the next slide. So one thing about CDBG-DR is it does, because it is federal money, it does have a little bit higher standard and there's more documentation and process that needs to be followed, environmental reviews and Davis-Bacon, notably, and of course, fair housing and non-discrimination. So, so that is a facet of that program. Next. Yes, so this is what I wanted to get to. Minimum of 51% of the units must be affordable at or below 80%. And it will be a competitive process, right? So, and these are projects that council will review and approve. Must be located in the Asheville city limits. And this goes for like working with self-help as well. Those projects will probably be looking to both this funding pot and state CDBG-DR. The gaps are really big on these projects and they continue to get bigger. Yes, Vice Mayor.
So what caught me was the 80% AMI or below. That always catches me.
Right.
Done any consideration of 60? What does that look like?
So 80% is like a cap. So we've certainly written it into our CDBG-DR action plan that we will target deeper affordability, particularly in that 60% and less range. The 80% is what is statutorily required, that we can't make those investments higher than 80%. But what we heard from our community, we heard from the council as we were drafting the action plan, is that we needed to emphasize that less than 60%. And so what we'll be targeting is.
Can we cap ourselves?
It's a good question. I don't think we want to programmatically cap ourselves, because I think we may paint ourselves a little bit into a corner with opportunities for good projects. But I think that by writing some preferability for developers who are going to be targeting that 60% and less category is what we've done at this point. I think it's an interesting thought.
So to be clear, my question is, can we, may we, not should we? The question is, can we cap it at 60?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I would be hesitant to communicate to the publicly that we're going at a different level than what is statutorily required. So Ben, maybe you can help me out there. Thanks, Ben.
I can't help you out, James, but I'm going to see, could somebody from self-help talk about that? I mean, I think, are you self-help folks, are you understanding the question? It sounds like 80%. It sounds like 80% AMI or lower is the affordability threshold you have used for this program.
Well, this is a different program we're talking to, right? This is a different.
Well, this is just the DR. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
But Antoinette, sorry, Councilwoman Mosley, to your question there, the Affordable Housing Loan Fund, we have again a max. We actually talk about targeting 60% AMI affordability. We have a max of 80% AMI. Will allow for mixed income properties where you think workforce units are helping to subsidize deeper affordability. And so we do have a allowance for 50% of the units to be affordable to 80% AMI, which tends to reflect our funders requirement as well, such as the Bank Community Reinvestment Act funding tends to come with that. So we can certainly target from the Affordable Housing Loan Fund deployment side, we encourage communities to maintain that 80% target or 60% target certainly, but have the leeway to go up to 80% or do the mixed income because you may have really good projects come along that can make a big impact on the community, but just aren't financeable at the 60% AMI level. So that's just to the Affordable Housing Loan Fund, not to this particular slide.
Okay, and so just for our sake, recognizing that these external ones may in fact go up to 80%, that would make me more likely to insist for the ones that we as a city end up giving out, that 60 is in fact the max.
Well,
Just putting that out there. Just putting that out there. I know it doesn't relate to self-help right now.
And just to note, when we talk about tax credit projects coming forward, which is a lot of these, and maybe Councilwoman Turner is going to say the same thing, they income average at 60%, and that's how they help reach their gaps. And in many of the projects you all have reviewed, there'll be some portion at 80, some portion below 30. So they average it with the below 30s and then the 30 to 60. So the average income is below 60, but you have a wider range of affordability. And I think if we cap it at 60, we're gonna potentially hamstring tax credit developers as well.
Understood.
Yeah, but we hear you.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. And I was also thinking about 319 Biltmore, where this got expensive for them, and they had some 80 mixed in, didn't they? I just wonder, how are we getting? The products we're actually seeing always seem to blend some. That's all.
And as JJ mentioned, that's kind of what makes a deeply affordable project more financially viable, is that mix of income levels across your unit types. But we've written into our action plan for this program that we have scoring criteria when we go out and want to receive applications for this funding through our DR program, that we are going to score applications higher that exceed that affordability threshold. So if you are able to show that you're going to be bringing deeper affordable units onto the market with your project and with your proposal to us, we are going to prioritize those proposals more so than others. though there's no like 60% AMI cap, we do want to kind of leave a little bit of room there.
And then just the last thing I wanted to say about the slide is that we're right now for this program manual looking at how can we make them forgivable loans, which, one of my concerns with self-help, if we are moving money to self-help, those are 20-year, 15 to 20-year loans, 15-year loans. And will there be a resource? Because many of the projects we fund are 30-year loans and sometimes even longer than that. And so this source as another gap filler could help balance that out for some of our developments, especially when we have these newer, like Haywood Street is an example, a newer developer. They needed really generous loan terms to make it work. So I think that's the last, next, Katie, I think that's the last slide on DR. And then we just had this table comparing the two, and I guess I jumped the gun on this. But it's nothing we haven't covered already. And then I think we're just back to either listening groups. Yeah, so maybe we should have ordered this before, but we did meet with 3 groups of folks. The first one was multifamily developers. The second one was more small developers, more focused maybe on home ownership. And then the third group was housing advocates. And I also, as a part of this, tried to make sure all of the AHAC members were invited to one of these groups, because since they're not meeting right now. The multifamily listening group they're really receptive, thought this was a great use of, they were great use of city funds, but also had a lot of confidence in the loan fund as well. We thought we might get some pushback from them and some concerns, but we didn't get any. Among developers who were working on homes for home ownership, there was some concern that there wasn't enough funding proposed for them, for that category, I will say. Again, the source of income non-discrimination clauses, as we talked about already. And they actually voiced a desire for the loan fund at self-help to fund home ownership projects. And I believe, staff is looking at that possibility at self-help, but that's not kind of what we would be buying into at this point. In response to that, to the feedback that we got from these folks, we did reorganize it. We had it, instead of having a $6 million allocation to the Housing Trust Fund, we had it even divided out even further between home ownership and land, and then had a 1 million TBD category. So we kind of put those together, which gives more flexibility and possibly more funds to home ownership. Next. And that's just, that's just a recap of that. Next, Katie. So next steps. So we'll continue to work with self-help staff to more fully bake this proposal before bringing it back to you. As Nikki said before, we're working on with Patrick Bowen about data, and we'll take your questions and any feedback you have and really bring a more full proposal back to you in August. And that would include both bond recommendations and the Affordable Housing Loan Fund. So, and staff and Haggerty continue to work on the program manual for the DR funds. So, and I think that's it for the presentation. Would love to hear any, I know we've got about 12 minutes before 2 o'clock, but if you have any other questions or comments.
I don't know, Sage.
I'm sorry. It's a kind of a basic one of just stepping back. I know we mentioned that the loan fund with self-help could potentially offer funding to this, but talk to me where in that chart of all these, we had 5 little boxes early in the slides, where does the potential for low barrier shelter funding live? I feel like that's coming to us from the COC at some point. We've had it kind of, we set aside money for the property, it got pulled back. Just where in our sphere of planning is it now?
And James, you can help me address this if I don't cover all the fine points, but I know during the CDBG-DR process, because yes, we normally utilize this committee to really work through the opportunities for the creation of shelter. And yet through the HUD framework, they require any emergency shelter activities be nested under the infrastructure allocation bucket. So when we start talking about emergency shelter opportunities, that will come through the overall considerations for the infrastructure funding of the CDBG-DR funds.
Okay.
And the reason behind that, sorry, go ahead, Nikki.
Well, and I was just going to say, like, in terms of just the current status of that, I know the COC has created a work group around shelter to really identify what the needs are in our community for that. So there is some planning underway just in terms of working through the COC to really fully flesh out what emergency planning would look like moving forward. So yeah, James, anything you want to add?
And the reason that it's not considered a housing activity, shelter is really considered like a public facility because it's not an address for folks who are sheltering there. Housing is a place where you reside, you have an address, you can get your bills mailed there. And in terms of like our timeline with that, we are in conversations right now with our homeless strategies division to create a position here at the city for home emergency shelter planning, and then getting that moving forward so that we can have some staff capacity to start really pushing those efforts forward for emergency shelter planning and then emergency shelter development.
Great. I hear there's this new loan fund in town that does low interest loans for them. I'm kidding, y'all. No, but that's great. I just wanted to make sure it was somewhere in our sphere of planning. So infrastructure is fine.
Anybody have any more questions? Well, this has been really, really, really helpful. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to hearing what's next at our August meeting. Thank you so much. Now, at this point, up next on our agenda is public comment. Katie, do we have any speakers in the queue?
No, we do not.
Okay. Hearing that we don't have any other speakers in the queue, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great day.